I saved for 10 years to buy a home. My cheating sister demanded that money for her lawyer, then showed up at my job and tried to ruin my career. My sister Clara, who is 3 years older than me, was married 5 years ago to a truly great guy we'll call James. James's family has a good amount of money. They're not super rich, but they're very comfortable. James himself is also a successful professional who earns a very good income on his own. My sister, on the other hand, has never been very focused on building a career. She worked some part-time jobs before meeting James, but never had any real savings or long-term plans. Her interests were always more in social activities and enjoying the moment, which is her choice, of course. When she and James decided to get married, his parents were quite involved in the planning. They paid for a large part of the wedding and also helped with a down payment on a house. Because of this financial involvement, their lawyers suggested that a prenuptial agreement would be a wise decision. James was gentle when bringing it up with my sister. He explained it was mainly to protect his family's assets and his own premarital savings, describing it as just a standard procedure in his family. The prenup essentially stated that, in the unfortunate event of a divorce, they would each leave with the assets they had brought into the marriage. Any wealth they built together during the marriage would be split, but his inheritance and pre-existing family wealth were to remain off-limits. The agreement also had a very clear infidelity clause. If either of them was unfaithful, that person would not be entitled to any spousal support or any share of the assets accumulated during the marriage. My sister was not happy about the prenup, and their discussions led to many arguments. My mom even got involved, telling my sister that she found the idea insulting. Throughout this, I stayed out of it completely. It was their relationship, their decision. In the end, my sister signed the agreement because she wanted the big wedding and the comfortable lifestyle that came with marrying James. For 5 years, their life together seemed perfect. They lived in a beautiful house and traveled a lot. My sister never had to work. James paid for everything. He bought her a nice car, gave her a generous allowance for whatever she wanted, and appeared to love her deeply. He was consistently kind and respectful to our family, including me. I've always been more quiet and reserved. I have a stable job in a technical field and have worked very hard for it. While I don't make a huge salary, I'm careful and responsible with my money. My biggest goal has been saving for a small apartment, and I've been aggressively putting money aside for years. My family knows this well. They know I have substantial savings. About a month ago, everything blew up. My sister went out with old friends from her hometown and met her high school ex-boyfriend at a bar. One thing led to another, and she spent the night with him. She wasn't discreet about it, and someone who knew both her and James saw them together. That person told James's friend, who then told James. There was no way for her to deny it. When James confronted her, she admitted it. He was devastated and told her to pack a bag and leave that day. He said he would be filing for divorce immediately and that he could never trust her again. My sister came to my mom's house in complete distress, crying and saying her life was over. For the past month, my mom's house has been the center of all the drama while my sister stayed there, calling lawyers and trying to find a way to challenge the prenup she had signed. Last night, my mom and sister sat me down for a serious talk. They told me that every lawyer my sister had spoken to said the same thing. The prenup was strong and ironclad, especially with the clear infidelity clause. Fighting it in court would be incredibly expensive, and the chances of winning were extremely low. My sister has no money to fund such a fight. Despite the generous allowance James gave her, she spent it all on clothes, salon visits, and lunches with friends. Her only remaining option, she said, was to hire a very aggressive and very expensive lawyer who specializes in challenging these kinds of agreements. This lawyer thinks there might be a slim chance for some kind of settlement, she told me, but it would require a long, messy court battle. Then came the real reason for the meeting. She needed $50,000 for the legal retainer and fees. She looked straight at me, with my mom nodding in support, and asked me to give her the money from my savings. I sat there in shock. They wanted me to hand over the money I had saved for my apartment. The money I'd worked for every day for the last 10 years, so she could try to get money from the husband she had cheated on. I told them no. Calmly, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. The reaction was instant and explosive. My sister started screaming, calling me selfish, saying I'd always been jealous of her and that I was happy to see her suffer. She insisted that families should help each other no matter what. My mom joined in, saying I had a duty to my sister, that I had plenty of money while she had nothing, and that I was being heartless. She even blamed James for the prenup, painting my sister as the victim. I didn't argue. I just repeated that my savings were for my own future and that I wouldn't spend them on legal fees. I reminded them that she signed the prenup and was unfaithful. Her choices, her consequences. Then I left my mom's house. Since then, my phone has been blowing up with calls and texts from them, plus some aunts who only know my sister's one-sided version of the story. They're all calling me selfish and unsupportive. I haven't responded to anyone. I worked hard, I was responsible, and she made a terrible mistake. Yet somehow I'm being painted as the bad guy in all this. So Reddit, am I the bad person for refusing to give my sister the money I saved for my own home to fund her divorce battle? Update 1. I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. It was incredibly helpful to see that I'm not completely crazy for thinking the way I do. I've read a lot of the comments, and the judgment seems overwhelmingly NTA, which I appreciate for the clarity. I still haven't engaged with my family since the big blow-up, but the situation has unfortunately continued to get worse. So I thought I should post an update to document what's been happening since then. After I walked out of my mom's house that night, the angry texts and calls continued for 2 straight days without stopping. The messages weren't just from my mom and sister Clara. My mom had clearly called her sisters my aunts and given them a very one-sided emotional version of events. As a result, I received long messages from 2 of my aunts telling me how deeply disappointed they were in me. They said Clara had made a mistake but insisted James was being cruel by throwing her out with nothing. They lectured me that family is all we have and that I should be there for my sister. One even said, "Money is just paper, but family is forever." It's easy for them to say such things. None of them have offered Clara any of their own money. They just expect me to be the one to provide it. I decided not to reply to any of these messages. I put my phone on silent because the constant notifications made it impossible to focus on work. After about 48 hours, the messages finally stopped. I thought maybe they had given up. I was wrong. The silence was just a prelude to a new tactic. A few days ago, Clara made a long emotional post on her social media. She didn't use my name directly, but it was obvious to anyone who knows us who she was talking about. She wrote about going through the worst time of her life, being heartbroken and abandoned by those closest to her. She added that some family members, people you'd think would be your biggest supporters, can turn out to be the most selfish of all. She wrote about how some people hoard their money and would rather watch family drown than offer a hand. She ended it with, "You really learn who your real family is during hard times." Many of her friends who don't know the full story left supportive comments, calling her strong and saying it was terrible she was being treated this way. Some mutual acquaintances who follow both of us have been looking at me strangely, and I know it's because they saw the post. My sister has always been good at playing the victim. It's a skill she's honed all her life. As kids, if she broke something, she'd cry so convincingly that my parents would blame me for upsetting her. This feels like the adult version of that same behavior. The social media post was annoying, but I could ignore it. What happened next was harder to ignore. Last night, my mother showed up at my apartment building unannounced. I live in a secure building, so you need to be buzzed in. Around 8 p.m., my intercom rang. It was her. She hadn't called first. She just showed up. I didn't want to let her in, but I also didn't want her making a scene in the lobby, so I buzzed her up. The moment she got inside, she started in on me again, this time not yelling, but crying. She told me Clara wasn't eating, was crying all day, and she was worried about her mental health. She said my refusal to help was pushing Clara over the edge. She informed me James had officially served Clara with divorce papers and canceled all her credit cards, leaving her completely dependent on my mom, who's retired and on a fixed income. Then she circled back to my savings. You have all this money just sitting in a bank account, doing nothing while your sister is suffering. You can always make more money, but you only have one sister. I explained the money wasn't just sitting there. It was the result of years of personal sacrifice. No vacations, no expensive purchases, overtime whenever possible. Her demeanor changed instantly. The tears stopped. Her face went hard. She told me our father, who passed away 10 years ago, would be ashamed of me, saying he always valued family above everything else. She accused me of thinking I was better than them because I had a better job and savings, and that I was looking down on Clara. The conversation went in circles. I stood my ground. Eventually, she got angry and started pointing at things in my apartment, my television, my laptop, suggesting I could sell them if I really wanted to help. The entitlement was shocking. She genuinely believes my personal assets are a family resource pool for her and Clara. I'd had enough. I told her the conversation was over and she needed to leave. She refused, sitting on my couch, saying she wouldn't go until I agreed to help. I told her that if she didn't leave, I'd have to call building security. That's when she finally stood up. She walked over, and for a moment I thought she might get physical. Instead, she got very close to my face and said, "You'll regret this. When you're old and alone with your money, you'll remember this moment and realize what you threw away." Then she left, slamming the door. I've now blocked my mom's and Clara's phone numbers, as well as my aunt's, who were messaging me. I feel I have no choice. My boundaries aren't respected, and the pressure won't stop. I'm worried about what they'll try next. The social media post and my mom showing up at my apartment feel like a dangerous escalation. I think this is just the beginning of a longer fight. And while I'm not changing my mind about the money, I'm starting to realize my relationship with my mom and sister might be permanently broken because of this. Update 2. It's now been a few weeks since my last update. I thought blocking their numbers and having that final confrontation with my mother would be the end of the harassment. I was naive to think that. The situation has escalated in ways I didn't expect, and it's now directly affecting my professional life. After I blocked their numbers, I had about a week of wonderful peace, a quiet time where I could go to work, come home, and focus on my own life. I started to feel like I could finally move on from this mess. But then the emails started. They must have realized their phone numbers were blocked, so they switched to a different way of contacting me. The first email was from my sister, Clara. It was a long, rambling mix of accusations and begging. She said James's lawyer had sent her lawyer a letter stating their intention to enforce the prenup to its fullest extent, meaning she would get absolutely nothing. The letter also made clear they had definitive proof of her infidelity, so there was no point in even trying to fight that fact. Her email said her lawyer was now dropping her as a client because she couldn't pay the initial retainer fee. She accused me again of abandoning her and siding with James. She ended the email with a forceful demand for the $50,000, calling it her last chance to get any kind of justice. I didn't reply. Instead, I created a filter to send any future emails from her, my mom, or my aunts directly into a separate folder I don't check. A few days later, I was at work in the middle of a team meeting when the receptionist told me I had a visitor in the lobby. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I got there, I was shocked to see my mother sitting there. I had never told her my company's name, but she must have figured it out somehow. I walked over and asked quietly what she was doing there, trying to keep my voice low because the receptionist was right there. My mom stood up and began talking loudly, saying she was there because her daughter was in crisis and her other daughter was refusing to help. She claimed she didn't know what else to do and that she was desperate. I could feel my face burning with humiliation as coworkers walked by, slowing down to watch. I tried to lead her outside, but she pulled her arm away and began crying loudly, saying Clara would soon be homeless and I was sitting in my fancy office pretending my family didn't exist. I told her this was inappropriate and that she needed to leave, but she turned to the receptionist and said, "Can you believe it? Her own sister is suffering and she won't even help. What kind of person does that?" I walked her to the door and essentially pushed her outside. She stood on the sidewalk, staring at me with pure anger. Later that day, my boss came to my desk to ask if everything was okay. He was professional, but it was obvious the scene had caused a disruption. I told him it was a private family matter and assured him it wouldn't happen again. That evening, I was so angry I could barely think. Showing up at my job crossed a line I never thought she would cross. It was a clear, manipulative attempt to use public shame to pressure me. The next day, things got worse. Clara somehow found my work email address. She sent a message not only to me, but also to my boss and our company's HR email. The email was a complete fabrication, claiming I was withholding family funds that were supposed to be shared after our father passed away. She accused me of financially abusing my position as executor of his will, something I never was, and leaving her destitute. To make her story seem convincing, she attached a copy of the divorce filing from James's lawyer to show her desperate situation, painting me as a cold, calculating thief. This created a huge problem. My boss called me into his office with HR present, and they had her email printed on the table. They told me these were serious accusations and had to be treated carefully for legal reasons. I had to explain the entire miserable situation, showing them texts and previous emails from Clara and my mom to prove a long pattern of harassment and to show that her story was false. I explained there were no family funds and that the money was my personal savings from my own work. They were understanding once they saw the evidence, but told me sternly that I needed to make sure family drama never spilled into the workplace again. They documented the incident. It's now part of my permanent employee record. I had to hire a lawyer to send a cease and desist letter to both my sister and my mother, demanding they stop contacting me at work. The stress is unbelievable. This is no longer about getting help from me. It's about revenge. Because I wouldn't give her my money, she's now trying to damage my career and my ability to make money for myself. I'm looking into more legal options if the harassment continues. Update 3. A lot has happened since my last update. The legal letter seemed to work for a short time. The emails and direct contact stopped. But the conflict has now escalated into something physical and, frankly, frightening. After the work incident, I walled myself off completely. I changed my personal email, locked down my social media, and focused on my work and plans to buy an apartment. I even had an offer accepted on a small place. For the first time in months, I felt peace. That peace ended last weekend at my cousin's wedding. I didn't want to go because I knew my mom and Clara would be there, but this cousin and I are close. I thought we could at least be civil for a few hours. I was wrong. I arrived at the reception and kept a low profile, sitting with friends. I saw my mom and Clara across the room and felt them watching me. For about an hour, nothing happened. I started to relax until Clara began walking toward me. She was holding a glass of red wine and had a hard, angry expression. When she reached me, she said she'd heard I was buying an apartment, while she was about to be kicked out of my mom's house. I told her it wasn't the time or place for this conversation. Her eyes narrowed and she said, "You have no heart. You're just like our father, cold and selfish." That was the same insult my mother had used. I stood up, telling her I was leaving to avoid a scene. That's when she threw her entire glass of red wine on me. It soaked my light-colored dress, ruining it instantly. People gasped. Before I could react, she lunged at me, trying to scratch my face, screaming that I had ruined her life. My friends and some groomsmen pulled her off me. My mother rushed over, not to stop her but to defend her, yelling at me and blaming me for setting Clara off. The scene was chaos. The bride was in tears, her husband furious. Security escorted Clara and my mother out, both shouting insults. I was left standing there, covered in wine and shaking with anger. The next day, I had visible scratches on my arms and neck. I went to the police and filed a report for assault, giving witness names and security contact information. I also started the process of getting a restraining order. This is no longer a family disagreement. It's about my safety. Final update. After the assault, official charges of assault were brought against Clara. I successfully obtained a restraining order against both Clara and my mother. They must stay away from me, my home, and my workplace, and cannot contact me directly or indirectly. The closing on my apartment went through without issues. It's small, but it's mine, and it's peaceful. In the wider family, my mother and Clara are now isolated. After the wedding incident, no one takes their side anymore. My aunts, who once lectured me, are silent. Clara's divorce is final. The prenup was fully enforced. She got nothing. She even had to sell the car James gave her just to cover initial legal fees and living costs. My mother's financial situation is poor, and she can't keep supporting Clara. Their relationship is now strained, full of arguments. Clara still hasn't looked for a job, apparently waiting for a miracle. I haven't seen or spoken to them since the wedding. My life is quieter, though lonelier. For all their faults, my mother and sister were still a big part of my life.